It's like gang culture. They will punish you. Whistleblowers are crushed beneath the feet of the organisation.
There's a real lived fear of, if I stand up here, I'm going to be the victim. The force will put their reputation ahead of the public, ahead of their own staff, and it's unacceptable. It's not right.
Two highly experienced, highly regarded officers who claim they've been forced out of West Midlands Police, victimised for daring to challenge a toxic culture inside the organisation. Out in the cold after 22 years, Khizra Bano is now bringing an employment tribunal claim against the force.
I thought I would be buried in my uniform. I was a police officer to my soul.
She was motivated to join after the events of 9/11. Having grown up in a largely Asian area of Birmingham, she saw the impact the so-called war on terror had on her local community and their relationship with the police.
So you wanted to join the police and change it from within?
Yeah, it felt like it was a very easy thing to do, to sit outside an organisation and criticise it, but to really get inside it, roll your sleeves up and try and make a difference.
Ms. Bano was eventually promoted to become the most senior female Asian officer in the region.
So when I got the call to say that I'd made Chief Inspector, I kind of had to, and I had to sit down on the end of my bed and take a deep breath and just say to myself, OK, you're a brown girl from Perry Bar, you're autistic, and you just made Chief Inspector West Midlands Police.
Amazing. And you felt supported by the force?
So yes, there was a long time where I was not just celebrated, but also showcased.
I first donned my uniform on Fozil Road.
Showcasing her success, this video.
The city of coming together.
Promoted as part of Coventry's City of Culture. Ms. Bano wanted to use her profile to help other officers. In 2020, police forces were grappling with issues around race following the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter protests. She set up a monthly forum called Brave Space to encourage officers to open up and reach some common ground. Ms. Bano was shocked by the experiences officers shared in those sessions.
Some of the comments that colleagues told us they'd been exposed to in the workplace, some of the things that had been done and said to them were really quite horrific, quite breathtaking. And if people are treating colleagues like this at work, how are they treating black communities and brown communities outside of work?
Give us some examples of that.
So, I mean, we had showers with the N-word and the P-word openly written.
So showers that police officers use within the station?
Yeah, within the station that nobody else has access to. We had a brown female who was told by a senior officer that her brown skin would look great against his white sheets. You know, in one comment, you've managed to wrap up all that, you know, misogyny and all that racism.
She was inundated with other disclosures. Following a terrorist incident, a Muslim colleague was asked,
"So your mates have been at it again?"
A black colleague was asked to
"Get on the table and give me a tribal dance."
A colleague with a mixed heritage son was told,
"You're lucky he's not any blacker."
And an officer said in front of witnesses,
"My dad used to say I had a nose."
Her sessions also covered misogyny and disability, and she was asking awkward questions around the disproportionate use of force.
So I was looking at why black men are 15 times more likely to be subjected to the use of a baton on the street than white men, why they're 8 times more likely to have a firearm deployed against them on the street than a white man. The levels of bias that were emerging were startling and were devastating.
Ms. Bano compiled a report called Bristling at Black. She says it detailed what hundreds of response constables had admitted about their attitudes towards black men. Their comments included,
"You wouldn't want your daughter to marry one."
"All black people take drugs."
"I'd never met a black person till I joined this job, so my only experience of them is as criminals."
"They don't like us any more than we like them. So when you see a group of them, you sort of bristle up, ready for a fight."
What was the response of senior officers to what you were presenting them with?
So they told me that they shared my horror and that they wanted to make sure that the racist attitudes displayed by police officers, that changes were made. And so I went away and I did a lot of work conjuring up, solutions, potential solutions, and they were all turned down. And I was told openly by senior leadership that they were concerned about upsetting the white male majority within the police force by deploying any of these measures that suggested that they might be racist. Meanwhile, I've got people on the conversations that I'm having with them telling me themselves that they are racist.
Ms Bano says the force continued to pay lip service to her reports on racism, but everything changed when she raised concerns about the treatment of this firearms officer who'd blown the whistle. Rebecca Callum won a record payout. This programme had revealed her story of racism and misogyny within the unit.
The second I got involved in Rebecca's case, the organisation closed its ranks. And I felt that really acutely. People stopped engaging with me. I had a phone call from an ACC shortly thereafter saying, this case has got nothing to do with you. You'll get caught in the crossfire. Stand down. Don't get involved. It was as though the life was squeezed out of my career from that point forward.
In court documents seen by this programme, the force denies Ms Bano was targeted for her support of Rebecca Callum or warned off by the ACC.
When Rebecca Callum broke cover and spoke to Channel 4 News last year, the force told us it's changing for the better and upholding high standards. But Khizra Bano believes that her experiences show nothing is changing. And she's not the only one who feels she's faced career-ending consequences for her involvement in Ms Callum's complaint. This despite national calls for police forces to better support whistleblowers.
Hard-working and committed officers, of which there's many within West Midlands Police, how are they ever going to feel like they can challenge that conduct when they can see the impact it has?
Rocky Callum was a sergeant with 15 years in the service, but he too claims that when he supported Rebecca Callum's employment tribunal, he was forced out of the job. He'd met and married her during his time in the West Midlands. Mr Callum said he'd been horrified to learn of the misogyny she'd revealed. Although it was a stressful time for the couple, initially he felt supported at work.
My line management was absolutely fantastic, empathetic. They appreciated the gravity of the case and the impact it could have on me and my family. At the point where I was called as a witness to give evidence, that support changed.
The force had already admitted all of his wife's claims. Mr Callum was called as a witness to a hearing by her defence team to determine the level of compensation.
Did they say to you explicitly, don't give evidence in your wife's case?
It was phrased that the force didn't feel it would be in the public's interest or the public would approve of me having been given time off to go and give that evidence.
There are some people watching who will say, of course you supported your wife, what husband wouldn't, that you were bound to be biased.
Yeah, I can't argue, it's my wife. I would do that for any police officer, and I would expect every police officer to do that for their colleagues, let alone their partners, their wives, whoever it may be. That's your duty, plain and simple.
West Midlands Police denies the legal claims made by Rocky Callum and Khizra Bano.
The force told us in a statement that there's no place for discriminatory attitudes in policing and that it's made significant progress in rooting out improper behaviour. It told us that officers are more confident and better supported in making internal reports and that it's getting better at disciplining and dismissing officers who engage in discriminatory behaviour or breach its high professional standards. But, the force told us, it'll resolutely defend itself against any unfair allegations of discrimination. And, it says, ahead of her employment tribunal, Khizra Bano used what it describes as sensational language.
Both Khizra Bano and Rocky Callum have been medically retired on mental health grounds, forced to stand down, they claim, for supporting a whistleblower and for revealing uncomfortable truths about a culture that still exists despite promises of change.
There are parallels with honour-based abuse. You don't shame the family and you don't air our dirty laundry in public. If you speak out, you are crushed, you are finished.
Well, joining me now is the former Metropolitan Police Assistant Commissioner, Neil Basu. Obviously, you don't know the details of these cases, but in your long experience in the police, are the sorts of things that were reported there that has been said by white police officers very unusual?
Well, I was going to say, I was hoping to sit here as a 56-year-old mixed-race man with 30 years policing experience and not tell you I was shocked and surprised by your film. I actually was. One of the most shocking things was not the language used, it was the fact that officers would openly declare it to a senior black Asian female officer. I mean, that's extraordinary. I mean, it seems as though there were no guardrails for what they're prepared to say. I'm genuinely shocked by that.
And are you shocked by the response that she had within her senior ranks, according to her account?
Well, according to that account, I'm not shocked. I talked a lot about institutional racism in policing after the George Floyd protests in 2020. I went to Chiefs Council, the 52 chiefs who pretty much control policy and direction for the profession, and I asked them to consider apologising for institutional racism before they launched the National Race Action Plan. That was December 2021. In January 2022, they voted not to do that. And very few chief constables have come out and said institutional racism is a problem. The ones who have faced a backlash. Most of them, like me, are retired. So I'm not shocked that senior officers seem to have a rather defensive denial and an optimism bias, thinking this is only a few people rather than a cultural issue. It's not just a few people. It's far less than the media would sometimes have the public believe. I worked with thousands of amazing police officers in my career, but it's far more than a lot of senior leaders are prepared to acknowledge.
And what about the bodies within policing? I mean, the Police Federation, which represents the rank and file, you know, where are they in this kind of issue in question?
This is what's quite disappointing for me. I mean, the decision by Chiefs Council not to support this point was made it a very easy decision for me to retire in 2022. But I've spoken to the Superintendents Association, I've spoken clearly to Chiefs Council. I've never been asked to speak at the Federation conference, but I do know the chair, I know the chair personally, and he came out and said that he personally believes policing is still institutionally racist. The chair of National Police Chiefs Council has said he personally believes that at a Staffordshire University conference last year. It seems odd that they are unable to represent their ranks because the ranks clearly don't believe it. But I think they're worried about a backlash, and I think that's an abrogation of leadership. I think we need to explain what we mean to the front line if we're going to take their concerns that they might be worried that they're all being called racist.
I mean, a lot of people say, well, what difference would that really make? I mean, we've been banging on about this question for nearly 30 years. You know, why is it important that people like the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, who still won't say it, and other senior officers say, yes, there is institutional racism?
I think we have to examine why they're not saying it. It is important, so you only have to listen to some very senior black and Asian voices in the community, some of whom sit on the London Policing Board holding the Commissioner to account, who disagree with the decision not to acknowledge institutional racism. He said systemic. It's a semantic issue. He agrees that it's not just about individual racists. He knows there's something wrong with the culture. I know he will try and do something about that. But not acknowledging it when the black community took great faith in William Macpherson's report in 1999. They trusted William Macpherson. They trust that definition. To say it doesn't exist now is a mistake, and to say it's because it's political, ambiguous or unhelpful fails to acknowledge the real feeling in the community. These are the people we serve.
And what actually needs to be done? What could be done? I mean, you have West Midlands Police say we've improved, which is an acknowledgement that they had a problem.
Yes.
So, I mean, who's doing this right?
Right, there's been massive improvements in policing. I joined in 1992. 100% of black, brown or female officers would have given you a horror story about how they were treated. Even in the Baroness Casey report, those percentages were much lower. Disappointingly, they're much higher than I think in the wider society. We've got to be careful who we recruit, how they are trained, how they are led and how they are promoted.
So just to hammer that home, you're saying there is more racism in the police than there is in mainstream society?
I think society has moved on. Some of those comments in your report that police officers are making to a senior Asian officer are things that are not reflected in, for instance, the British Attitude Survey. I'm mixed race. Somebody saying that about they wouldn't want to marry, I mean, that's personally very offensive given that my mother is white and my father was Indian. I'm amazed that that isn't reflected in the British Attitude Survey. And what I would like to call out is the Chief Constable of Police Scotland. I was with her last week. Her team, who have admitted there's an institutional racism problem, are bringing in policies and procedures to try and change the culture of their force. It's called Act, Don't React. It's based on behavioural science. It's trying to give police officers a skill about how to interact with people who they claim they don't understand, or, you know, the word is cultural incompetence. I don't understand your culture. I think you're going to be antagonistic to me, so I immediately react in the wrong way. They're bringing in something that I witnessed last week that I think will be game-changing for the profession.
Neil Bassey, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And we obviously don't have a response from Police Scotland, but thank you very much indeed for that.